Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome to episode 93 of a long-running series where the name of the game is to try to find developer techniques or sometimes unused content that's out of the boundaries of a video game. Now, I swear 99% of the time I am collecting the footage for these games myself, but in some cases you need special hardware to cover certain games, and that's where Frico comes in. Frico once again being the superhero here and collecting all the footage, and all he asks for in return is that you check out his video at the end of this one, and that I put his big old mug on the screen here. Hope that was good enough for you, good sir. But anyways, I hope you guys are all excited for the Uncharted 3 episode, because I think we all know what comes after that one. Though we shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves, let's get started with Uncharted 3. So first of all, I think it's worth addressing the question, why is Nathan Drake in a meditation pose? And the reason for that is that this game is running off of PlayStation 3 hardware, and Frico is using debug menus in the game. Now, unfortunately, those debug menus this time around do not have a free camera. Instead, we can move around the player position wherever we want, and it just so happens that the meditation pose is the least intrusive amount of Drake on screen. But anyways, what we're looking at here is a different perspective of the opening of Uncharted 3, where Nathan is fighting in the bar, and what we have is a lot of cleverly angled outdoor environments that you normally can't see most of. And the reason for this is that the perspective is always inside of the bar when you're playing the game normally.
Hurry it up, Nate. Shit, the filth. This way.
In this next scene, the police show up, and Drake and Sully gotta make their escape. Though what's pretty funny about this is that if you were to take Nathan over into the alley, you can see that there's no police cruisers there at all. Instead, it's just blue ambient lighting attached to nothing. So next up, we're going to talk about young Sully. Now, I don't know about you, but this scene in Uncharted 3 was probably the most memorable for me. And one of the things that bothered me the most is that you can never really quite catch up to Sully. But if we were able to, you can see exactly what the developers do to make sure that no matter how fast you go, you're not going to be able to catch Sully around the corner. Like over here, you can see that he just disappears immediately, which isn't too exciting, but if we were to move ahead just a bit, we can see this scene where he goes through the door, and normally your character goes through that and another area loads. However, if we were to just look at what happens to Sully, you'll see that once again he disappears, but there's also a Roadrunner wall that's very difficult to see. And also, once Sully goes through this building, you'll notice that with this new perspective, he goes all the way up the staircase. And then later he teleports into the Keymaker's room, and the Keymaker starts his work. And you know what, while we're here, let's take a little bit of a tour in the Keymaker's room itself. And now here's a zoom out of the Columbia Rooftop Chase scene. And before we depart from this scene, I also want to give you a close-up of all the streets and cars that are well off in the distance. Now, I can't ignore the fact that we're doing a zoom out back to back, with this time being Syria, but let's be honest with ourselves, the landscapes in the Uncharted series is just too good to pass up. They're probably some of the best in video games, period. And Syria in Uncharted 3 is done so well that the environment almost looks like it's straight out of a PlayStation 2 game. You could easily get yourself lost in this environment for a good hour. Now this is something I love. Outside the boundaries in Yemen, all the key items that are used in this chapter neatly stored just outside the wall. This includes Drake's journal, a pencil, 2 maps, Drake's ring on a necklace with a missing texture, and the astrolabe. So during the scene when Nathan is tripping out, the environment gets really foggy and everything else just gets really distorted. However, all of those effects can be disabled, and from this perspective, you can see the entire area without any obstruction whatsoever.
You lost me, didn't you?
So during the chase scene with Talbot, he ends up stopping here and he pulls out his phone, which is already a very difficult detail to see. But what's far more interesting than that is if you were to take a very close look at what's going on here, you can see that he's holding his phone backwards. Yeah, I'm sure that's very effective.
Oh no.
So on the ship, there's something I really wanted to show off. It's one of those scenes where the hallway is flooded, and I thought it was really cool to see this from another perspective because everything works so seamlessly, but from another angle, you can see how it's pulled off on a technical level. And this is what the sideways ballroom looks like from the outside as well. And that's pretty awesome and everything, but before we leave the sinking ship, I should show you that it's not really sinking. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's not in the water. If you were to take the camera well outside of the ship, you can see that it's floating above the ocean. So let's take it up from the sea to the air. At this point in the game, you are in a cargo ship as a stowaway, and due to the very controlled nature of the camera here, if we were to move it outside of the boundaries, you'd see that the plane isn't fully modeled. And just for aesthetics, why don't we also see what it looks like when Drake is hanging outside and taking a look at that from another angle? Kinda nice, isn't it? But unfortunately, what comes up must come down. And unfortunately for this plane, it comes crashing down. Though I'm very happy to say that viewing this from another angle looks absolutely fantastic, as it's truly falling apart here. Though at a certain point, the animation just straight up stops and it's just hanging frozen in the air. After which there is the wreckage for the plane. While there isn't a whole lot you wouldn't expect to see, it really is just nice to admire how detailed it is, despite how close up we've gotten at this point. Now the desert's a lot of fun to check out. And of course there's going to be things that people are going to want to ask about, like the Oasis Mirage. And we can give you a nice close-up look at that before it dissipates. But that's not the best part. Let's see what's going on with Sully.
Wake up.
Help me.
Come on, give me a hand.
I've been looking for you. Couldn't find you. I don't know how long I've been out here. But, like, Sully? Sully?
There's a mirage of Sully too, where he helps you back up on your feet. But then once the camera starts panning around, you see that Sully's not there. He was in fact a mirage. Though if we were to take the camera below the sands of the desert, you can see that Sully's character model just sinks into the ground and stays there for a while. Next up, I want to show you two really good zoom outs here. The first one is of the desert itself, which of course we had to do because it's one of the most seemingly far-reaching environments in all of video games. Well, correction, it sure does seem that way. And I'm still not arguing the fact that it's a very large environment, to be sure. But thankfully it doesn't take that much height to show the entire environment in one shot. Other zoom out that I want to show you is the Desert Chase Mesa Loop. And very surprisingly, almost the entire environment is rendered all at once. You'll notice that only a little bit of it is called out over in the back, but all in all, there's a lot more environment to here than you see in most games. And once again, those environments in the Uncharted series are just absolutely amazing looking, so Whoobar is no exception, and I feel like we should do a nice long zoom out of this. And I'll make sure to let it hang for a bit so that you can really soak in the details.
Sully! Hey, Sully! Sully! No.
Now we're going to show you what happens to Sully here when he goes into the Mirage, which once again Sully manages to disappear entirely once he's off screen. And before we take the focus away from Sully, I wanted to show you one more thing. It's this scene where he's talking to Nathan through the window. And if you were to take the camera on the other side, you could see that he is standing on air. Naturally, if you can never see fully outside the window, you're never going to notice the fact that he's standing in the air. So the developers took advantage of that. And here's the final part of Whoobar collapsing. And it should be noted that everything that can be seen in this scene is pretty much the only thing that exists. Quite the opposite from the Desert Mesa Loop. Hey, thank you very much for watching. So next week, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. It's something I've never done on the channel before, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I've had a couple of people do a test audience thing for it, and they seem to like it. And also, I can't stress this enough, it's totally worth it to go over to Frico's channel and see the kind of videos that he has. Right now, he's featuring a custom level mod for The Last of Us. And what is that mod exactly? Well, he managed to put in a level from Uncharted 3 into the game. So if you want to see Joel strolling through Uncharted 3, I think it's definitely worth a watch. I'll leave a link to it in the video description down below. Anyways, guys, I'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed the new video idea, and I will see you around. Take care.